It's my show. I should know how it works. All right.
All right.
Hello and welcome to episode 100 of Rockstar CMO FM. The M is the marketing and the F is, well, you deciders. You're probably wondering, does the world need another effing marketing podcast? I'm your host, Ian Truscott, and this weekly podcast serves as my excuse to chat with marketing friends, old and new, that I've met through my career from techie to CMO, and hopefully share with you some marketing street knowledge that my guests and I have picked up along the way. Come say hello. We are Rockstar CMO on Twitter and LinkedIn, and a proud member of the Marketing Podcast Network. This episode was recorded on Friday the 4th of February. I hope you've had a good week and you are well, safe and staying as sane as you feel you need to be. This week, to celebrate 100, I interview my regular collaborator, Jeff Clark. I learn about the importance of win-loss analysis from expert Ken Schwarz, and where better to celebrate 100 episodes than in the Rockstar CMO virtual bar, where Robert Rose is waiting with a cocktail and a thought for the week. But first, we need to pay the bar tab. I'll be back in a moment.
We'll be right back.
After this word, we'll be right back. After this
word.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Christy Heiler hosts a fantastic podcast called Own It. Christy, tell us more about the show.
Own It is all about celebrating women and non-binary advertising agency owners. We talk about buying out of the Boys Club of Advertising because less than 1% of ad agencies are owned by women.
And where can people subscribe?
You can find the podcast at untilyouownit.com. We're also on the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcast.net. And of course, you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.
Right, on to our first segment. If you're a regular listener, you'll be familiar with the wise words of Jeff Clark, former research director at Serious Decisions Forrester and principal strategic advisory here at Rockstar CMO, as we regularly chew the fat on various marketing topics. To celebrate 100, I thought it was time we shared a bit more about where this wisdom has come from, get the insider tips from his industry career and through his time advising an amazing roster of clients, and share with you a bit about the Jeff Clark I know. Hi, Jeff. Welcome back to Rockstar CMO FM. How are you, my friend?
I am doing very well. Thank you for having me back.
Of course. We did promise that we were going to talk about some more stuff about marketing education.
Yes.
But I changed my mind. And because this is our 100th episode, I thought I'd do something different this week.
Wow. Do we get up and do a Chinese fire drill around our studios to celebrate? Whoa!
That sounds cool. Yeah, let's do that. I'll see if I can find the sound effects. But what I thought I'd do is, we've heard a lot of great advice and insight from you, Jeff, and snippets of your experience and where you've worked before. But I thought maybe, as it's our 100th episode, we might share a little bit about you.
Oh, I'm flattered.
So I thought I'd interview you. So I regularly mention that you are a former research director at Forrester Serious Decisions. But shall we kick off with where your marketing career started? What inspired you to get going?
Sure. By the way, can I interview you on your career next week, or what, can I turn the tables?
Absolutely. There'll be a much shorter conversation because you've done way more better things than I have. But yeah, sure. Let's give that a go.
Well, for longer too. Well,
I mean, mine would be just as long in terms of years. It's just not as exciting. Let's make that very clear.
Okay. So anyway, so where the heck did I start? So, I mean, this may seem like a non sequitur, but coming out of college, I was very into the beginning of the renewable energy and solar wave that was happening, around the energy crisis. So that is way back in the late 70s, early 80s, and I snagged a job at the New Hampshire's governor's energy office. Public sector. in 1980, and I'd taken marketing, I'd taken communications. I was basically an economics major in school, so I had some of the tidbits, but I never really said, I'm going to do a career in marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And after 4 years government, I ran a nonprofit, very small nonprofit for a very short period of time. Then I got a job for a really small 7-person software company that was doing energy analysis. They did for like utilities and heating, air conditioning. So it sort of fit into what I was doing prior, but it was a software company, very marginal one at best. But and I was like the sales guy, and then I started doing some marketing work out of necessity. I had to put a catalog together. I did, sort of partner co-op programs. I did training for people at HVAC companies. I did created collateral, photo shoots, of our products and stuff like that. And then, and I realized that it's like, the stuff I was doing for a profit-oriented company was the same stuff I had been doing, for the government. Because I was not in a job that was all about, laws and regulations. It was more about advocacy, promoting solar energy. So anyway, I really, and the sales side of the job, I just didn't, I personally was not very satisfying to me. I just didn't have the same drive that the coin operated folks or the people that are, well, I mean, it's a highly skilled job that just has different motivations. And, we could talk about sales versus marketing all day. But anyway, then I was getting married. It's like, okay, now I got to get a job with a company that can actually pay my travel expenses. So I landed myself in Boston with a small startup word processing company, and I jumped from software company to software company until I landed at Forrester Serious Decisions.
Yeah. Well, you skipped out a big chunk. That was that brought us.
Well, I didn't know you wanted me to take you all the way to today.
No,
because that would.
No, because
I don't have that kind of time.
What I wanted to do was because you spent most of your career in B2B marketing, so I was going to sort of focus a little bit on that chunk that you just skipped past. You worked with Kronos, Progress, Pegasystems, and SDL.
Yep.
What is it? I mean, because you've always been in B2B, haven't you? So what are the key things you think that did you learn during that period that you think B2B marketers need to focus on?
Well, one thing that could have occurred to me, which just popped into my head, is that it's like my first. So after the small word processing company, I went to Kronos, and I went to Kronos as it just hit IPO. And today it's a multi-billion-dollar HR and blah, blah, blah company. They just changed the name recently. And it's like, geez, if I stayed there,
oh, man.
I probably would have made more in options and stuff than some of the other places I go. Although every place I went, was reasonably successful, so I can't really complain. But to answer your question, which is again one of the key things that B2B marketers need to focus on, is I really think it comes down to understanding the customer and knowing how to communicate them to them. The goal is obviously to have your products and services match their needs. It sounds simple, but it is just I think it's one of the things that a lot of marketing teams or individuals don't really focus enough on. And everything we do around marketing technology, data strategy, advertising, digital, those are all, I mean, they're all tactics and methods and tools to help us do that thing, which is connect with the customer, the prospect, and connect with them at the right spot and with the right message and the right channel. And which is when we were at SDL. I mean, that was the whole thing. Bring all these tools together so you can deliver that right message at the right time and all that. And it. I mean, there's, from a technology perspective, that's still a bit of a holy grail. But just there's nothing that. I mean, it all comes back to understanding that customer, and there's so many ways to get to that. That's one of the things that the CMO and the marketing leadership, as well as the individuals are in the marketing team, are just, that should be their number one priority. Get that fixed first.
Yeah, well, and fixed, understanding the customer.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. And I think too few of us don't leave the office, do we? We need to actually meet the customer and understand who they are and what they do. Yeah.
Because one of the things I was thinking about this morning was that in my career I guess I had the opportunity to meet customers and partners as well as be involved in the sort of the typical things of doing focus groups and but when you go out on trade shows or you go on, when I was at Progress, I did a lot of product advisory council tours, so where me and the tech guy would go out and we would talk to big customers and partners, and it's just like there's nothing that replaces that, because in addition to whatever research you can do, so it's like the first and third party research is absolutely necessary, but there's always something missing if you haven't actually haven't had the conversation, because then you start to put it in. It's just the way human beings work. It's just like it starts to put everything in context.
Absolutely. So that was your first. That's your first key thing that us B2B marketers need to focus on from that part of your career. What else did you learn?
Well, I think that one of the things that this may roll into a little bit about what I think your next question might be, but is that having this alignment on a strategy is just incredibly important. And I one time I went to a user conference for one of our partners when I was at Progress, and the CEO of former CEO of Porsche was there. And he was an American engineer who went over to run the German car company, and he just had this thing that just stuck in my head ever since, which is, good plan, well executed is better. And I should emphasize, a good plan, well executed, is better than the perfect plan, poorly executed.
Yes.
And so I think both my experience being in, working inside marketing teams as well as being an advisor to them is I just really see companies struggling with the getting everybody on the same page. I mean, whether it's the marketing teams on the same page with the rest of the other, customer facing functions, or whether it's everyone in the marketing team is on the same page, because, I mean, unfortunately, some of my worst experiences is when somebody, who had some, sort of some power within the marketing team would just be totally like, this what the CMO says stinks. He doesn't know what all he's doing. The president does what he's doing. I know what it is. And we used to call those. I don't know if I quoted that in this show before, but the president used to call those terrorists, because they were the ones that were like, we're just trying to get together on the same strategy. And somebody goes off and says, you're all wet, and goes off with their own opinion. And so often, and this is where it's so important to go back to understanding the customer, because, if everyone has sort of been infused with this understanding of who they are, what their needs are, how they talk, then that kind of drives everything, as opposed to people's opinions.
And I was also interested in asking you about your time at Serious Decisions, because that must have been absolutely fascinating, because you're there as an advisor and you're there diagnosing various challenges that you see with these big B2B companies that you were working for. Can I ask you to share a few of the little secrets of what you picked up there? What sort of challenges or problems, I mean, without naming names, did you see that were were the common things you saw as you talked to all these different companies?
Yeah, well, certainly a common thing leads back to what I was just talking about, is that you see, like I did a lot of advisory on planning.
Yeah,
I kind of like the sort of the annual. What are the mechanics of doing an annual marketing plan? And what's it look like? What's the process go? Whether it's sort of the whole marketing plan, the campaign plan, or even I did a lot of work on technology, marketing technology. So what's the technology roadmap look like? And it's just you'd see people struggling with the fact that you've got the debates between business units, product divisions, marketing versus sales, and there was one company we did with, which won't name any names, but it's like we were kind of struggling with them because they were disassembling their marketing department. But one of the interesting things that came out of that, and again, this is really mostly from a technology perspective, is that they pulled the operations teams together, sales and marketing operations teams, and it's like they finally, a lot of because we did a technology assessment for them, and a lot of the technology issues they were able to solve because it's like they weren't coming at it from two different perspectives that are going to like meet and have a battle to see where are we going to put our data, how are we going to track our engagement, et cetera, et cetera. And so they came up with a more unified approach, and so I think that's that's just so typical. And the other area that, and this is somewhat along the same lines, but people would be trying to execute successful campaigns, and of course, the way we defined it, and a lot of this was just kind of the terminology, is that the campaign was the aggregate of all of the tactical efforts focused on a particular customer set with a particular business need. And so, if you had a different customer set with a different need, or same customer set with a different need, then that's a different, campaign. And the problem, it's absolutely the right way to go. And certainly in my career, it's like I could look back and I could say, the reason why we were successful here was because we were able to do that. But that requires, it's like the campaign plan requires people being settled on the marketing plan, which requires the people being settled on a company strategy, where sales and marketing are, they're defining the customer segments the same way. They're defining, what they're trying to sell to those segments the same way, what the needs are. And, again, we would see lots of successes. I help companies get from, sort of the bad place to the good place. But boy, it's like you run into another company and you're like, that's struggling with this. You're just like, oh my gosh, they can't see, they can't see their way through this. And so often it's, both you and I worked with a lot of companies that were built by acquisition, or had a core company that acquired other companies. And that usually was one of the key sources from problems, because people with an older vision or a different vision still existed and couldn't get aligned.
Right, I'm going to pause it there. I'm sorry. On that great point. I was enjoying that. We were going very long, so after the recording, we agreed to split this over 2 episodes. So we'll pick that conversation up next week, and I promise there is some really good advice to come that I found really useful, and I encourage you to join us again next week for the rest of that conversation. Now, normally at this point, Jeff nominates a tune, which he did when we recorded the full interview, and I'll play that tune next week. So I'll pick one for this week, and I realise neither of us have a ghetto story, but I love this tune. From 2010, Baby Cham, True Ghetto Story.
This a survival story, true ghetto story. This is my story, real ghetto story. Hey, I remember those days when hell was my home, when me and mama bed was a big piece of foam, and me never light bathe and my ear never comb. When mama gonna work, me go street go roam. I remember when Danny them get my snow cone and make him lick a bread of them, kick up Jerome. I remember when we visit them with pure big stone, and the boy Danny pop out something with full chrome. I remember when we run, but I get him knee blown, and my best friend Richie get doing I'm down. I remember so the avenue turn in a war zone, and Mikey mother fly mode cause she get alone. But Mikey...
So there we go, a little snippet of True Ghetto Story by Baby Cham. By the way, you can find a link to the tunes we choose along with all of Jeff's links in the show notes, which you can find at rockstarcmo.fm. Right, on to my guest. Ken Schwarz is the managing principal at PSP Enterprises and is an enterprise software professional with a 30-year career spanning roles in engineering, sales and marketing in software infrastructure companies with a speciality in competitive intelligence. Ken holds a bachelor's degree in East Asian Studies from Harvard College and lived and worked in Japan for 7 years. Probably the shortest bio that a guest has provided me with so far, but that does not reflect what a fascinating B2B career Ken has had, and I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Welcome, Ken, to Rockstar CMO FM. How are you?
Very good, thank you, and thank you very much for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. We've just recently met through our mutual friend Jeff, who's also on the show. But for those of you, for our listeners who don't know Jeff, tell us a bit about yourself, Ken.
Sure. Well, yeah, I've known Jeff for many years. I have a background in product marketing in the enterprise software space, infrastructure software like middleware and databases and storage and so on. And Jeff and I worked together at Progress Software and also Pegasystems for several years.
Nice. And you're now with PSP Enterprises. Tell us a bit about what you guys do.
That's right. Yeah. So I'm the managing principal and owner of PSP Enterprises. Mm-hmm. We are a specialist consultancy focusing on competitive win-loss research. And what we do is we help our clients find out how and why their customers make their competitive decisions and what our clients can do to improve their win rate.
Yeah, I love it. And we chatted the other day. I mean, win-loss analysis is a fascinating topic for me as a B2B marketer. But if we rewind a little bit, as I sort of got introduced to you and I was looking at your LinkedIn profile, you've had quite the marketing career. Tell us a little bit about your journey and what inspired Ken to get into marketing.
My checkered career. Yeah, well, I have a background that started in East Asian studies, of all things. I studied Japanese and wanted to live and work in Japan, which I did. But I also had a technical background. And so I started an engineering career track. And to tell you the truth, I had a puzzle on my mind. And the puzzle was, why is it that some companies grow like gangbusters and take over and others just seem to fizzle out? And, because knowing the answer to this, of course, you could become very rich. You could start one of those companies, or at least you could work for the right company and not the wrong company. And it was such a puzzle. Is it technology? Is it the leadership? Is it the culture? Is it, United States or Japanese culture seem to have different kinds of companies. So I found this endlessly fascinating, and I didn't know it at the time. But what I came to understand is that it's really competitive strategy that explains it. And that has always fascinated me. And so, my gurus are people like Clayton Christensen and Michael Porter, Innovator's Dilemma and Competitive Strategy, those books. And I've discovered them over the course of my career, and they're really eye-opening. So I ended up moving from a general product marketing kind of background towards more of a competitive role in the companies I worked for, and then ended up specializing it. And so that's my background. And during those years doing that work, I used PSP, my company, as a client. So PSP did competitive research for me while I was at those companies. And so 2 years ago, the founder of PSP, Richard Case, approached me and asked if I wouldn't be his partner with the interest to buy his company because he was looking to retire in the coming years. And that's exactly what I did. So I guess I'm like the guy who liked the razor so much he bought the company.
I love that. And a great marketing ploy as well. Talking about advertising, and also, I mean, you've also Clayton Christensen. I mean, we've been talking about inspiration, what inspired people to get into marketing and books and stuff. And Clayton Christensen. I mean, I know that Robert Rose, who's also on the show, big fan of his work too. I think he recently passed away, didn't he? Last year.
He did. Yeah. I'm so sad. Yeah, and he had quite a health debacle over many years, but an amazing person. And if, to your listeners, if they haven't read his books, Innovator's Dilemma and Solution, they really must. It's just fantastic.
Yeah. I recommend that too. It's anything written by him. But let's get back to win-loss analysis. Why is win-loss analysis so important? I mean, predominantly, I guess we're talking about B2B here, aren't we?
Yeah. So that, you can do win-loss analysis in other areas, but we focused on B2B and really deals which are big enough that they're handled by direct sales force. So they're pretty involved. And knowing why you're winning and losing, I think on the face of it, people want to know. But there's really two big reasons I think that clients value it. And I guess it's the head and the heart. So one reason that appeals to the head, to the finance types, is the win rate. If you win more deals, your win rate goes up and your potential for more incremental bookings goes up. And every company wants to have that. Lost deals are very expensive, and these competitive deals that can go on for months or even years, to lose them at the end is heartbreaking. But somebody's going to lose them, and if you have a couple companies competing, more are going to lose than win. So that's a big one. And then if it's important to the heart, it's to the head. It's also important to the heart because companies are just not driven by the numbers. There's a culture to a company that is, that benefits if everybody's rowing together. You know what I mean? If you're rowing on a river and you have a bunch of guys rowing crew and they're really synced up, the boat just cooks. But if you don't, it's very choppy. And we've all worked for companies that were more or less well coordinated and organized. And I think one of the big benefits of win-loss, though, is that it gives you this outside-in perspective that can be very unifying for the leadership to be able to bring in a single voice of the marketplace that's very reliable and isn't subject to all of the usual internal politics and bickering that can go on without having that kind of clear lodestar to guide the company. So it's very, very powerful for putting together a culture that's driven by the competitive market and gets everybody working together.
Yeah, and you hit on three key things really there. One of them is the emotion of B2B sales, right? Is that you're cutting through that because you're finding the data. I mean, I love your analogy there of head and heart, right? Is that, quite often there's quite a lot of emotion around losing a deal and sometimes emotion around winning a deal, but those two emotions are very different, aren't they?
Oh,
and
absolutely.
This idea of alignment behind why things are happening in your marketplace. And so the insights you're saying there, are the insights just limited to how you go about selling, or is there more that we can gather as marketers or as product development teams from this?
Yeah. Well, it's a whole body sport. I think. So you've got to have all the parts of the company engaged. But the big message here is that it is that outside in perspective.
Yeah.
You find out what customers are thinking. And, customers form their opinions from a variety of sources. They of course deal with your salespeople, but they're reading the marketing materials. They're reading stuff that are written by other companies' marketers, by third-party analysts. They're getting their hands on the product. They're evaluating things. So they're forming their decisions based on all of these inputs. And, the findings from win-loss can and should be leveraged by the entire company. And some things are going to take longer than others to change. The product can take months or years to significantly change. But things like sales messaging and the handling of objections and the positioning of a competitor's capability or message can be taken on very quickly. So getting a quick feedback from the marketplace through win-loss can give you what you need to know for a kind of a 1-2 punch. First, you can teach the salespeople how to deal with the problem in the short term, and second, you can give the product people the insight they need in order to leapfrog the competition, or at least to mitigate the problem.
Yeah, that outside in view is so important almost with everything that we do in B2B, because we do get a bit wrapped around the axle, don't we, on our opinions of the market and what we think the competitors are doing. And how many times have I been in a room where the most senior person from sales or even the CEO has this perception of why we're winning and losing based on, their own feelings, their gut feel, right? That's what, and it's this priceless marketing data, isn't it, win-loss?
Yeah.
So so I mean, I was going to actually, when you're doing win-loss analysis, can you just go and ask the sales guys?
No. Unless the sales guy happens to have just read the win-loss analysis I did, then he won't know what you need to know in order to be able to get that perspective. Of course, everybody has their hands on the elephant, but which part are they touching?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
the salesperson's experience is going to be limited to whatever deal they worked on, and just as you pointed out, people are going to be most vocal about whatever it is that just happened to them, and that's to be expected. So to have a balanced view that looks at the experiences of all the salespeople and not just one or two, and can find a way to sew together all of those inputs in a way that gives you an accurate read, so you know what really matters to customers and how those customers are sizing up their options in the marketplace today. That kind of readout can't be taken from a sales rep alone. You need to gather it, first of all, from many deals, and second of all, it needs to come from the customers themselves and not from the sales rep.
Yeah, yeah. And I've been in a situation where years ago, and when I was in pre-sales, where I suspected the customers trying to be kind, or at least they were trying to give the sales guy an objection they couldn't handle, so that they could go, so they would just go away. You don't. We've gone through this whole selection process with you, and we've got to this point, and we've decided we're not going to select you because you don't support a particular database type. And it's like, well, you knew that from the beginning. I don't think that's really the issue, is it? You're just saying that because we can't handle it. So I think that intel point from the salespeople can be not their fault, can it? Sometimes it's the customer that's telling the sales guy something just to kind of move it along.
Well, that reminds me of a very interesting study that my business partner Richard Case did many years ago when PSP was very, very young. It was a new company, and they did a study with one very large client where they compared the results of the information gathered from customers, 50 deals, and they compared that with what they found when they asked the reps why they won or lost. And what they found was that in general, the losing reps didn't have any idea why they lost, which I guess kind of stands to reason because they didn't have the control or the insight that they needed to win. The winning reps actually were much better. They had a much better understanding about why they won. But even though they had a better understanding, they tended to overestimate the capabilities of the competition. They thought the competition was stronger than it really was as far as the customers were concerned. So they weren't an accurate way to find out what's going on. And I think, you put your finger on a couple problems. One is that it's very hard to tell a person to his face what's wrong with them when you're breaking up, right? I mean, so that's bad. And then the other thing is that even when you win, there are certain things that customers are not going to want to talk about with vendors as straight as they might with me, because they don't want to show their hands. For example, pricing is something where if I'm a customer, I don't necessarily want to tell my vendor whether I thought I got a good price or not. I've always want the vendor to think that they got the best of me, so that way I'm in a stronger position the next round. I think that's just common sense. So there are many things which you can't find out on your own nearly as well as you can find out if you've got an independent consultant doing it for you, especially if the independent consultant does the interviews blind and anonymous. So that way the respondent doesn't actually know who I'm working for. So they can't couch their answers just knowing that they're going to make their way back to their vendor or one of the competitors. They just don't know who they're working for. Yeah,
and I love that. And there's a couple of things I'm pulling out again from what you were saying. A couple of things there. One of them was there's probably a correlation between a successful sales guy that wins where there's a good understanding between him and the customer, right? Because
Mhm.
aren't all good sales guys, their second favorite answer is no, isn't it? So they can just move on. So they like to get quickly to either a yes or a no, but quickly to a no is fine. So I wonder if there's a correlation there from your study that actually the sales guys that were in touch with the customers and therefore understood why they won, just understood the customer better in general. Right? So that's interesting.
I think there's a lot to that. One thing that we find in these studies is that the customers really do appreciate a consultative style of selling. So the reps who do a better job of really understanding what the customer's needs are and fully understand that context before they start pitching really do have a better time in the sales process. And one of the benefits of doing win-loss is just showing people how this works. When we give the clients these verbatim transcripts that show the conversation between me and the customer, and the customer talking about this and comparing their good sales experience with their not so good sales experience, it's pretty black and white. And if you ever needed some customer quotes to prove to the salespeople what really works, win-loss is fantastic. So part of it is the analysis that tells you that, yes, these are the things that you need to fix, or these are the weaknesses that you need to attack on the competitor. But I think also the ability for me to show my clients and for them to then show their internal constituents customer quotes that really bring it to life can be very, very powerful change agents for getting people to make changes where they otherwise wouldn't.
Yeah, and when you were talking just now about the importance of it being done by a third party, in my experience, win-loss I think is done a lot better with a third party because people open up, and I was going to ask you about that anyway. But I also think, in my experience, case studies are better when they're done by a third party. The conversation is just way different, is it, than if you ask one of your customers, why do you like me? Whereas if an impassionate, impartial third party does the case study, you can extract some really interesting insights that way, can't you?
That's certainly true. I think that part of it also is that when you have a third party do it, it gets done. Case studies and win-loss and things like that they're all a little bit like writing thank you notes. I mean, you should do it, but people don't.
That is so
But if
true.
something comes up and it seems more urgent, more important, so I'm a believer in outsourcing things that are important but can easily get knocked off by some emergency from above.
We've kind of drifted a little bit off topic. We're talking about case studies, but I find that is so true about case studies because somebody who's dedicated to getting the case study is going to work hard to do that because it's hard to do. It's hard to drive the customer's process as well as your process, and none of us have got the time for that. So I completely agree with that. Yeah. So what's your approach? So I think we're both in agreement here that this sort of thing is best done by a third party. So how do you tend to approach a case study with somebody? So I was going to ask, what is it the marketing team can do? And it sounds like what the marketing team can do is get some budget and hire a third party, right?
Yeah.
What's the approach?
So I don't want to stop people from talking to their customers and talking to prospective customers. Obviously, that's really important. But I don't think that most companies are going to be set up to do it as thoroughly and consistently as you would if you were to hire a third party. That's just a fact of life. And the other thing is that we talked about is the perspective that an independent person can bring in by doing blind and anonymous interviews, I think is very valuable. You can't do that yourself inside a company unless you lie to your customer about who you are, which is unethical. So, you mustn't do that. You have to tell them who you're working for, and then that can color the research. So, for an unbiased readout, you want to use somebody. And so I think those are the key things. But if you want to gather information from your sales team about what's working and not working, you should definitely do that. Just don't ask the salespeople why they won or lost, because what you're effectively doing is asking them to be mind readers. They don't know. So don't ask them questions they can't answer. Ask, and this is very common in CRM systems. What's the primary reason you lost? What's the secondary reason you lost?
Yeah.
What does that mean? What is primary? I mean, I don't even know.
Yeah.
So the same thing's true with primary competitor and secondary competitor. These questions are nonsense. There are much, much better questions that you can and should ask your salespeople around how things are going throughout the sales cycle. So that way you can find the hot spots and you can solve those problems in the field and take away the issues that are blocking them. Those are the kinds of things I think you should be focused on with your sales team, and talking to customers and exploring issues with them in an open-ended way, I think is incredibly important. But doing it systematically, finding out why you won and lost, is probably something best done by an independent agency.
Yeah, and just for the record, I wasn't meaning to ding the sales guys that the information is no good. Often they are incredible domain experts.
Oh my God, yeah.
Plus, as a marketer, they're going to tell you what's the most frequently asked questions they get. How can you support them from a content perspective? What questions do we need to answer on our website and our content so they don't get asked the questions, so that we can be more upstream? So absolutely, I mean, sales guys are great.
Oh yeah. Those are great questions to ask. Just don't ask the question, why did you lose? That's advice. Yeah, it's really a pointless question, but it's so commonly asked. And unfortunately, what happens is the salespeople not keen to look bad. They'll just make something up, or they'll choose the first thing in the list. If it's a pull down menu, it's the first one. So you can tell if you do a little analysis if it's amazing how frequently salespeople choose the first item in the list, then you know that's bad.
Well, that's fabulous. Thank you very much, Ken. That's a nice summary of win-loss analysis and why it's important. And I don't think we were too hard on the sales guys. So I think that's good. So finally, to my final question, we have a regular feature on Rockstar CMO called the Rockstar CMO Swim Pool, in tribute to all the rock stars that threw things in hotel swim pools back in the day. But it's our portal to marketing health, the overhyped trends, BS, and snake oil from this practice we love. What would you like to see chucked into our pool?
Oh, wow. Well, I'd say competitive intelligence automation is my big beef. Yeah. So I'm all for competitive intelligence automation for competitive analysts who can use these tools to good benefit, to scour the internet and find all these signals that things are going on. So that way they can try to put together a bigger picture. But these things that end up feeding into portals that are intended for salespeople or for executives, for automated readout of what's going on in the competitive marketplace, I think are very ill-advised. In my view, salespeople want to know one thing, which is, how do I beat the competition? And executives want to know, what's a good investment decision? And data, which supports these things, should be disclosed judiciously in support of whatever perspective you want to bring. But you don't want to pump data, no matter how it's been filtered, to these audiences. And that's what I feel that these tools are doing. And it's just going to generate a new round of disappointment, I feel, as people try these things out.
Yeah, that's so true, because data is there to help us make decisions, and those recommendations need to be curated, don't they? If you just exposing executives to raw data, you can just interpret whatever you like, can't you?
Yeah, curation is a great word. It takes real human judgment and intelligence and experience to sort through these things. And I'm always concerned about a process that bypasses that.
Yeah, I love it, and it's a common theme actually in the pool, in that we marketers are outsourcing our brains to the machines, so it's very consistent to what I hear a lot. Okay. Well, that was fantastic. Thank you very much, Ken. I love that topic of win-loss analysis, and I look back at my career and realize I haven't done enough of it. I've seen it. I've done it often, and it's such an insight. And like you say, it's something that you just don't get time for, and you drift away and it doesn't happen, and you think, we really ought to do that. And I think people should, and they should ought to talk to you about it. So when they do, Ken, and they spin the dial on the interwebs, where are they going to find you?
Oh, okay. Yeah. PSP Enterprises. PSP stands for Peer Survey Professionals. So
Wow.
PSP Enterprises. You can search for us on the web and give us a buzz. We'd love to speak with you and see how we can help.
Excellent. And I'll include a link to PSP Enterprises and to yourself on LinkedIn, Ken, in the show notes. And I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Have a great day.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Ken. And if you're a B2B marketer, a nice reminder to give win-loss analysis some attention. And I will, of course, include all of Ken's links in the show notes, which you can find at rockstarcmo.fm. And if you'd like some help, please get in touch. Right, time to celebrate 100 episodes. And where better than the Rockstar CMO virtual bar and join my friend and content marketing guru and chief troublemaker at the Content Advisory, Robert Rose, to be transported away with a cocktail and a marketing thought. Good evening, Robert. What are you drinking?
Oh, hello, my friend, and happy 100th show here. I mean, holy moly, the bar is just hopping here. I mean, there's so much going on. I think it seems to be some sort of 80s pop band over there in the corner playing some sort of music. I'm not sure what that is. It's some sort of synth-driven pop 80s thing.
Yes, that's the sort of thing we play a lot here, especially when Jeff Clark makes a recommendation. So yes, that sounds about right.
And there seems to be someone really talking quite loudly over there in the corner. I think he's giving a political speech of some kind. Anyway, he sounds German too. He sounds. I don't know.
Let's see if I can get a non-copyrighted version of that particular speech. No mariachi band this week, unfortunately.
That's no mariachi band, no, because you've already got that downloaded. So it's we need to find things that you have to go out and find. That is the whole aim.
Has this show got a fourth wall left, or whatever it is that you performers call the thing between us and the listener?
Yeah, this is the fourth wall. We're breaking the fourth wall here. Is what this is.
That's classy, isn't it? One must do that as a
one must do that, especially on your 100th episode. So seriously, congratulations on this. This is quite an achievement.
Thank you very much. It's been 100 consecutive weeks as well, which I'm quite proud of. But it started as a lockdown project, and one would have hoped that. Yeah, and we're still talking about COVID 100 weeks later, which I'm very surprised by. So
yeah. I mean, it's amazing. It's utterly amazing. And and to celebrate, I have a very special cocktail for you. I have an incredible cocktail. I'm calling it a gin and tonic. I'm hoping you might have the ingredients for this because it is a very special sort of. It takes a very special gin and a very special tonic to make this. It does not have olives in it in this case, but that is our cocktail for the evening. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I've got my 2022 bar with me, desktop bar with me. So let's see if I can make a gin and tonic.
Yeah.
So, what ingredients are you using there, Robert?
I'm using. There are two primary ingredients. Gin is the first one, and the second one is a tonic water. If you have such.
Right. Okay. Let me see what I've got. So again, I have three ingredients. Did you put ice in that?
I did put ice in the gin and tonic. Yes.
Jolly good. I'm just putting some ice into a shaker thing, hang on a minute. I might have the very thing. Did you put Hendrix Lunar gin into it, or did you?
I did put Hendrick's gin in that. It's just amazing.
Oh, you do like a Hendrick's, and I forgot to make the big cork. I'm just pouring the gin into the little measurement thing because I'm measuring now. Very
the big cork. You have to say that very slowly.
I'm actually using a little measuring jug that came in my cocktail set here. Right, so I've put the gin in. Unfortunately, you'd be surprised to learn, and probably very surprised to learn, that I have entrusted my tonic making to a company called Martini, and they seem to have produced from those ingredients some vermouth.
Ah.
I don't have any tonic on my desk.
Yeah.
I'm still using up my Christmas vermouth. Let me just get a splash of that in there.
Did
you just put a splash of tonic in, or did you probably put a lot more tonic in than I just put in vermouth?
And
then,
I mean,
all right. I'm gonna. Oh, I'm doing the same as I did last week. I'm going for my olives too soon. I'm gonna give that a stir so it gets really cold. Right, and then I'm going to strain that. I don't know how this comes across. I'm just straining that into my cocktail glass. Okay. And I'm going to add an olive. You didn't put an olive in yours, did you? You made a very good point that you don't.
I did not.
One doesn't, I don't think. Do you ever put cucumber in your gin and tonic? I quite like a cucumber in my gin and tonic.
A cucumber is lovely in a gin and tonic, yes, especially in the spring, I find.
Yeah, especially for Hendrick's, actually. I've just realised my anchovy, my olive is stuffed with anchovy. I don't know if that makes it a particularly mucky gin and tonic. Let me try this. Oh, Robert.
There you go.
I'm really getting the gin. That's delicious. And what are you calling that?
I'm calling that a gin and tonic.
Wow, that's delicious. I could drink one of these every week.
I suspect you could.
I'll have to get back to gin and tonics.
Yeah.
Yes, this is
100
delicious.
episodes in, it would seem that it would be appropriate.
Yes, well, I did about 87 having gin and tonics. I've done 4 having martinis.
Yes.
And yes, I should have stuck with the original joke. So we're going to have these lovely gin and tonics, and on my 100th episode, where shall we be celebrating?
Well, I thought it would be fun to talk on your 100th episode about something we never talk about, which is, of course, content. And so
I love me some content.
Yeah. But, more specifically, like, what content are we going to create? And there was something that's been a little bit in the news of late, with Spotify and Joe Rogan and Neil Young and the controversy over that, and certainly what we're starting to see in terms of the true extremism of content out there. I was watching a social media group, and they were having a discussion. It was a marketing social media group. And in the discussion group, there was this discussion about content. And one of the posters in the social media group posted up this idea and said, what content should I be creating that could be popular? And the inevitable came in, right? The response is like, go look at your audience. What questions can you answer for them? Understand their pain points and start writing about that. Getting off of writer's block, all the usual sort of advice. And the poster then sort of updated the post and said, thanks. That's nice and everything. But I didn't mean like any content. What I mean is I want to be controversial. I want to be provocative. I want to get a level and have my stuff go viral. So what should I talk about? And the theory that this poster then sort of said was, the idea is I want to go viral with something and create something really provocative and controversial so that people will look at who the heck I am and find the other stuff that I've written about, and the right people will find me for marketing. So it's sort of like this idea of, lighting off a flare gun, I guess, and sort of finding, that there's something good underneath the flare. And predictably, the tone of the conversation got into a fiery debate about the very flawed notion of that idea, if not the ethics of that idea. But it got me thinking. And what I started to think about is there ever a case where we would purposely put out a piece of content with the explicit goal of failing? Like, we try to fail.
Wow.
And my answer that I came to was, yes, there is actually. And, we all know like failing can be productive, right? Obviously, people talk about there's whole entire books written on the idea of, we learn more from our failure than we do our successes, et cetera, et cetera. And of course that's true. But the concept there is that we're trying our level best to succeed, and we inevitably will fail at some things. And so there are lessons learned, right? There are lessons learned from us trying to succeed and not succeeding. But I'm interested in the opposite, which is when we deliberately try to fail, or at least do something that is considered a mistake, and then maybe either learn something or are surprised by the results. And there's actually a book on this, which I found in my sort of searching around on this topic. It's a book called Brilliant Mistakes by author by the name of Paul Shoemaker. And he talks about how David Ogilvy, the classic ad man, used to do this all the time. He and his team, they would actually run ads that had either been rejected by the client and or they had rejected as a team, just to see, just basically to say, if did we make a mistake? And a few of them, including, by the way, that great iconic Hathaway shirt ad. This is going to show my age a little bit. The one with the eye patch, right? There was this great campaign they ran with, guys wearing Hathaway shirt, and they all have eye patches on, and it's an iconic advertisement, and became legendary. And that was a mistake. And so the key is that there are times when we should take time, money, content, availability, whatever it is, and sort of just make a deliberate mistake. Now, I totally recognize that there are times and places for this, right? Like, learning how to skydive is not when you want to make a purposeful mistake. You don't want to deliberately fail in that. But in marketing and content, there are definitely times, and it reminds me, and I was reminded of when I was doing this research, of a few years ago, there was a VP of marketing at this B2B tech company, and they had, he came in new, and there was 90,000 people subscribed to the email newsletter. But whenever they would dutifully send it out every Friday, the engagement on it was almost negligible. Like 90,000 people and 10 people, right? We're clicking on things. And he was like, what's going on here? So what he did was he said, let's make a mistake. And so he sent out an email. He took a segment of the people, basically people that weren't responding to anything, and deliberately made a mistake, which was to send them an email saying, so sorry to see you go. Basically, we got your unsubscribe notice and you're now unsubscribed. And if this is an error, let us know. And then click through to this, little survey that you could take and blah, blah, blah. And, basically the idea was you're almost certainly going to lose in all of them, right? Because nobody's going to respond to that, right? Of course it's going to be that way. But it didn't turn out that way. As it turns out, yes, the majority did. About 60% of them never heard, never whatever, and they unsubscribed all those people. But about 40% of the people actually did either take action on it, clicked through to, what was going on the landing page, and or another significant percentage actually filled out the survey to say, no, this is a mistake. I didn't unsubscribe from this thing. Wow. And about 10% of them actually answered the poll saying, hey, if you would just send me something different, I would actually respond. So now it's not always going to work out that way. And it's certainly, certainly a mistake is a mistake is a mistake. And sometimes, and most of the time, probably you're just going to confirm the fact that you make a mistake. But taking the time to actually deliberately do something, even if it is only just to sort of, occasionally test our assumptions about something or a rule about something. There's that classic, never blog on the weekend, right? Never publish a blog on the weekend.
Or a
why
podcast.
Not? Make a mistake. Let's do it, right? And see what happens. And so, there's a famous quote that I hear all the time it's usually attributed to the IBM founder, Tom Watson, who said, basically, if you want to increase your success rate, double your failure rate. And it seems to me like the only way I'm ever going to double my failure, the only mathematical way I'm going to double my failure rate is if occasionally I try and do it purposely. So that's what's on my mind. And I think it's just a really interesting idea.
Yeah. Well, I think, that's a great topic because, what I was thinking while you were talking about that is define mistake. What, in some cases, the mistake could just be going against your normal doctrine and therefore could be considered a mistake. You're zigging against your own zag or zagging against your own zig or whatever
exactly.
it is, and trying something new. So, and then there's the case that I actually saw somebody present about this, about email deliverability, and that if you make a typo in the subject line, then people will open the email. But of course, at that point, you've made it clear that you're an idiot, right? So
right.
People are opening, but they now know you can't spell. So there's a win and loss around that kind of thing. But I think it's a really interesting idea. And then how does it go? How does it go back to that person that clearly wanted to do a top 10 list of Hitler's greatest mistakes or something like that, or greatest achievements or whatever it was they were thinking? They wanted to write something controversial and they wanted to,
what their goal was to write something, something complete. And this is, I think this is a helpful safety tip, right? So this comes back to the discussion about this is a flawed idea, right? They were going to write something like, COVID-19 is, whatever, right? Or they were going to write something completely inflammatory to try and get virality. And hope that by getting notoriety and virality that somebody would dig a bit deeper into who is this person and then find them interesting, right? And it's, to a certain degree, you can see that strategy at play with more controversial media figures, right? So when you think about a Joe Rogan and, somebody like him, he's very famous, right? And he's very famous for having, now he's famous and gets his listeners by being relatively controversial. And so that, so people talk about him. And I believe that in brand, in the world of brands, it's fraught with risk.
Absolutely.
Because when he comes out and says something like, what he's recently come out with and said is something to the effect of, he said something to the effect of he was saying nobody should call them. Now I didn't hear the details of this, so I can be paraphrasing incorrectly. So just big asterisk here, right? But the headline I saw in the article was he said that black people shouldn't call themselves black because unless they come from the deepest, darkest parts of Africa, which is just ridiculous at its face, but everybody goes, what? And of course clicks through and reads through and, wants to know more about what the heck he's saying, if only to hate listen to it. And so that's the kind of thing where brands are often encouraged to do something like that because it'll get news or, all publicity is good publicity or something like that. And hopefully people will be able to sift through that and get to the meat, get to the stuff that you really want them to listen to. But I think, boy, these days, that's just a short fuse getting ready to blow up in your face.
Well, I think the problem is at the moment, as marketers, we're being educated on a diet of the only way of getting our organic reach in social is to take, is to pick a fight almost, right? Because we're seeing that success with our politics and all that kind of stuff. But the difference is somebody like Joe Rogan, who I don't know particularly well, and I realised that I was confusing him with somebody else for years. But Joe Rogan, or you could even say Donald Trump, or I think you used an example a couple of weeks ago on your show about Howard Stern. The difference with those people, and I think the person that perhaps was asking in the forum about how do I become viral and be controversial, is that's actually, this is them being their authentic selves, but a little bit, and I hate to use the word authentic because we're pretty much killing it as marketers, right? But that's who they are, right? They're just amping it up to 11 to attract the attention of the audience. Whereas I think if you're a brand or a person building a personal brand and you're not that like that, then to suddenly do that, you're just going to look like a bit of a dick, aren't you?
Right.
Nobody's going to come.
You may win the battle and lose the war, right?
Yes, indeed. And they're not going to know who you are.
Is that, what, in the old days, you could do something like that and it would go forgotten, right?
Yeah.
Because media has a very short-term memory when it came to those kinds of activities. So you could do something outrageous and the news media might cover it, and your local news media might cover it, and the industry rag might cover it, and then it was out of the zeitgeist, and there was no permanent record of it because there was no internet, and so you could, you could largely move on. So you could. It was much easier to do it back in those days. Now the internet never forgets.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you find yourself cancelled or whatever it is, and I mean, we know marketers in the B2B industry that their whole thing is to pick a fight with the biggest vendor in their category, and that's the way they build their reputation and their company's reputation. But that's who they are, right? I think that. How am I going to, I was just cringing when you were describing that. How do I write a controversial piece of content that's going to go viral? It's like, oh, for Christ's sakes, what are you trying to actually achieve from a business perspective long term?
That's right. That's right. So, you've got to understand that before you do anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's a great thought. And when we do think of the controversial thing that we need to share you need to share, and you're going to post it somewhere, Mr. Rose, where would you post that?
I'll post it to my newly, hopefully fixed website. It's at contentadvisory.net. We've been working hard. Our little bees have been in the hive working, and so hopefully fixing some of the broken links there.
It's fair. Isn't it amazing? You start tinkering with something, and it is really cobbler's kids' shoes, isn't it? You start tinkering with something, and then
totally.
It's like it has a domino effect. I always disappear down rabbit holes of what it is I should be fixing, and it really isn't the thing I should be fixing. And then when people want to hear the most controversial, viral views they can on the social media webs, and on the interwebs, and they spin the dial, where are they going to find you, Mr. Rose?
Well, they'll find those opinions on joerogan.com. But if they want sort of the banal, soft, middle of the road opinions and advice on content marketing and content strategy, I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter typically.
That's fantastic. I just realized I should really call this show softrockstar.com. Soft Rockstar.
Yes, Soft Rockstar.
Nice
Yacht Rock. Yacht Rock content.
All right, mate. Well, thank you very much for coming by on my 100th episode, and will I see you again in the bar next week?
Of course, at 101. Let's start this adventure all over again.
Excellent. Thank you very much, mate. I'll see you then.
Cheers.
Thank you, Robert. And as you may have gathered, I never know what he's going to suggest, either the cocktail or the sound effects I'm going to have to find. So, that's a wrap on episode 100 of the Rockstar CMO Effing Marketing Podcast. Who knew I'd make it this far? So a big thank you to you for dropping a dime into your podcasting jukebox, selecting our track and jiving along with us. I've been your host, Ian Truscott. Thanks again to Jeff, Ken and Robert for sharing their insight. Please follow them, say hello, and check out all the links we discussed in the show notes, which you can find on your favourite podcast app or at rockstarcmo.fm, where you can also find all our previous episodes. So, does the world need another effing marketing podcast? Let us know. We are Rockstar CMO on LinkedIn or Twitter, and please drop a rating or review in your favourite podcasting app. Or just keep listening. I'm glad you're here. Next week is episode 101. We'll complete the interview with Jeff. I'm planning to chat with my first guest, fractional CMO J. Robert Slaughter. And as you heard from Robert, we'll be in the Rockstar CMO virtual bar. Until then, have a great week. And I hope you'll again join us here next week on Rockstar CMO FM.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.